Hello and welcome to another episode of the How to Create VR tutorial series, where you learn by watching other VR and AR professionals create the magic. I'm Marcelo Lewin, a VR and AR developer, evangelist, and the guy behind howtocreatevr.com. My guest today is Steve Morrison, an IT technology specialist and AR developer at Rent-A-Nerd. Today, Steve will show us how to create an AR app that is dynamically driven by outside data using Zapworks Studio. But before we get started, if you enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and remember to subscribe to my channel. It will only take you a second, but it will really help me tremendously so that I can continue providing you these kinds of tutorials on a weekly basis. All right, now that that's out of the way, Steve, welcome.
Oh, thank you.
I'm glad you're here. Thank you for joining us, and this is exciting. You're going to be showing us how to use Zapworks Studio to create a AR app, and then we're going to demo that AR app using the Zapper iPhone app, right?
Correct.
But before we do that, why don't you just give us a little background? I mean, I already kind of explained to people a little bit about you, but maybe you can expand on it.
Well, I've been a IT field for most of my life. I've started from circuitry assembly plants and worked my way up to self-employed computer repair technician and hobbyist and doing in AR and virtual reality.
What made you get into AR?
Believe it or not, fell in love with a movie a long time ago called Lawnmower Man, where it was all virtual reality. And ever since then, I've been wanting to do stuff in that. And now that the technology is finally catching up into a world where, an average person can work on it, I've been diving more and more into that.
Very cool. I think that movie got a lot of people into VR.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. So what are we doing today?
Well, we're going to be going through a experience that I created. I call it Weather Mill. It grabs AR information from a weather website and changes the environment based on that information.
Got it. So we're demoing how to create an AR that gathers data from an outside source. In this case, it's a website, but it could be a JSON, it could be a database, it could be whatever.
Correct.
Well, why don't we start by getting a quick overview of the app itself?
This is Zapworks Studio. This is the Zapper's premier software for doing a lot of programming that you can get very detailed on what you would like to do. Basic overview on the left starting side here, we have a hierarchy, which is your groups as far as how you want to organize things. They're actually laid out as placement as well, so things that are on the top of the list are further back than things in front of the list. So if you have an object, like in this case I have world, and then I have light, the light would be in front of the world in the experience. Underneath it next will be a properties tab where you're allowed to change things, if it's visible, colors, and so forth. I'm going to jump across the other side here, our library media. This was basically anything you've imported. As you can see, I've got pictures and stuff like that there. Underneath is our symbol definitions. These are very crucial in here where you can create an object and reuse it. A lot of our 3D models will show up into this, which, turn on lighting. You can actually see and interact and change the actual model here, and it will actually translate back to the actual model itself. One of the last major features underneath on the bottom left is controllers. These are actually can either be states or timelines that will allow us to change things. So I go to here. This here is a timeline that I use to control the time and day for the weather pattern. Now, as I play this, you can see that the sun and moon rotate. At the same time, this is changing the lighting, moving them around, and so forth. I can manually rotate it. As you can see, it gets brighter, comes around to the moon, you get a moonlight coming around. So I have the time basically simulating a 24-hour period here.
Is there a limit to what you can and can't animate in the timeline, or can you animate pretty much every property of every object?
Yeah, every property of any object that is listed in here. As we go through here, dived in here a little deep because I make groups. As you can see here, I have underneath the properties tab here, there are things that are listed. Anything that has a plus can be added, which is everything that's there. From at that point, as you go through the timeline here, at each point, any of these little white eye markers is an actual change in the event.
So those are keyframes, basically, for those that understand like Premiere Pro or an editing animation program.
Exactly.
I see. So it interpolates between one keyframe and the other automatically.
Correct. Yep, and as you look in there, you can see the numbers that correlate. Like the first one I'm doing is rotating the whole group there, and starts off at a 0 position and rotates to a 360 position.
Got it. And can you change the keyframes to do like ease in and ease out, kind of like you do in Premiere or After Effects? You can. Okay.
Yep. We can do multiple qualify. We've got linear.
Oh, wow. Okay. You got quite a bit.
Yeah, we've got quite a bit to it. There's, as far as the keyframes here, we see how they got the lines in front of the keyframe is a bit thicker. This is linking to a transition. So if I actually moved the group, it would automatically update the rest of the information.
I see. Okay. So it's pretty powerful animation software too, I guess.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. And then you mentioned the property. So you have on the hierarchy, is that kind of like layers in Photoshop pretty much?
Yeah. Because, it basically works its way through the group and stuff. More or less, in this case, like right now, I have the windmill, and then I have the sign in front of it. So the sign I need to place down in hierarchy because it's in front of the actual windmill.
Oh, I see. So lower items are actually on top.
Correct.
Which is the opposite of like Photoshop, where items on top of a layer are really on top of everything else.
Correct.
Got it.
Yeah, it's starting, if you think about it this way, the one I've selected in the hierarchy is the cover page, which is the very picture on the bottom. Everything's built on top of that.
Yeah. So the top is the bottom is the top.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. Excellent. And then maybe can you expand a little bit more on the symbol definitions? You said they're objects, but can you explain a little more about that?
The entire application we're looking at is technically a symbol. Zapworks is designed so that I can create this entire environment and put it in, and I can export it and add another one. Give you an example here. These are pre-designed symbols that Zapworks makes available to you, where I can have a 3D model, curve, play videos. Actually, we'll just throw one in real quick just to show you. Now it shows up in the bottom of my list here. This is one of their pre-designed photo feature that allows you to attach a 3D object and you can interact with it. So this in itself is its own symbol. It's its own program altogether. Now from there's attachment features that we can link between the two that will allow you to interface with it. So it'd be kind of like if you wanted to create, say, a sign with a scoreboard. You can create all the information, do all the work within the symbol, and just send the data to it.
I see. Yeah. So it's basically an object you can reuse over and over.
Exactly.
Right. So can we make our own objects as well and publish them?
Correct. Yes, we can.
So we can use them across different projects.
Exactly. And I've done that quite a few times myself.
Okay.
Another example to that would be this was a 3D, one of the clouds. Mm-hmm. And what I've done is I've created a timeline in that cloud for the weather, for rain. And I've created multiple versions of it as far as, light, heavy, and so forth.
And you saved it as a symbol, and then you can reuse it in any project that requires a cloud.
Exactly. And now if I come back over to our actual clouds group here, these are the ones that if you see here, right. I've reused Cloud 5 twice in my experience.
Yeah, and then are there parameters for symbols like they are for the other objects that you can customize? So when you create a symbol, can you publish parameters specifically that you want to allow the developer to change?
Yes, you can actually, within your symbol, you can actually create references. So you can create, share links to it and stuff.
Right.
So I can say, toggle switches and stuff. So I can create my own properties to it.
So that way you can make it easy for them to basically customize. So if you have, let's say, a specific branding that you use in like an intro in all your AR apps, you can create it as a symbol, allow people to change maybe the text or whatever, and then use it whenever you want.
Correct. The one of the video symbol has right off the bat where you can have it autoplay, and they have a link for the video feed that you want to play through it. So that's part of your properties automatically that they've shared.
Excellent. Okay, we got a really good picture here, and obviously you've got landscape portrait, and you have a couple of other buttons up there. Maybe you can give us a quick overview of that.
Starting from left to right, basically you've got your scale, rotation, properties, Bezier, your text. So basically, as you go through your objects that you have in here, go to our sun. You can see my properties light up for the position, rotation, and scaling. And if you look on the bottom here, you can see the sun has its XYZ marked. In the center here, I can zoom in and zoom out what it would look like as far as with the camera moving in. So the center is what you would actually see if I physically move the camera in and out.
In your phone?
Correct.
Yeah, and in this case, you set it up as portrait.
Correct. Since you said that, like I said, I have a landscape mode and a portrait mode, so I can physically rotate to see what it would look like. I have upright and flat as far as what orientation the object or my image will be. Right now, it's sitting in this way. We have a few other options here where we can jump to if I want to look from the front or if I want to look from the back. Kind of like if most people are used to 3D modeling, these are your basic modeling interfaces. We also do in the center here, we can choose between what type of device we want to test on. So it will correlate to those basic devices. So if I want to know what this would look like on an iPhone, I can choose the iPhone and choose which version. We have the world experience here for simulating ground. So that way, if I need to know how far away something is in relations to camera.
So you would use that also, like if you're creating an app that needs the ground for measuring, for capturing. Correct. Before it. Yeah. Okay.
We also have a photosphere, which does come in handy for your full 360 photospheres. You can simulate that so that way you know roughly where it is. We have light, which is something new that Zapworks has just recently entered into the system. So right now, I can either add no light, I can add a light if I don't have it already in the system, which I do have, and then we can simulate what it would be, with automatic light on. So right now we use my simulated so you can actually see that I have light. As I go to the hierarchy here, you can actually see the light itself. These are the different types of light we have. Because we got point light. Pull up the list here real quick so we can see it. We have directional light, point light, spotlight, and environmental light. And those are new this recent updates to Zapworks Studio. And actually part of this experience actually does use that. As we go through here, like I said, the sun rotates. You can see the environmental light turning up. As it comes back around, I have a spotlight from the moon, shining moonlight.
I see. And did you attach the spotlight to the moon itself? So all you're doing is rotating the moon and the sun, and because everything isn't within the moon and the sun, the light goes with it.
Correct. I've got, like in my group here I've created, I've got the moon. Like I said, I have a point light, which is just around the moon, so the moon itself glows. And then I have a moonlight, which is a spotlight, which, as you can see on the line here, shines straight
Right.
down.
And your rotation that you're doing it at the moon level group.
No, actually, the rotation I have the moon, sun, stars is in one big group.
Because you're rotating everything at once, yeah.
Correct. Right. But I could just rotate the moon individually, or like in this case, the sun, because the sun is separated here into multiple parts. I could actually rotate the sun itself, like the rays could move one way and the center could just be stationary. So with, timelines, you can do all of those little features.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Very cool.
Let's see. So I think that pretty much covers the basic stuff on top here. As far as in the main page here, you had the bottom right-hand corner, we have the plus, basically, which is your movement, where I can move the world, which would be as if you were to really move the printed tracking image. The circles here allow me to maneuver and gyro it around. So if you were to move the paper or as you move the camera. And then the last one would allow me to zoom in and zoom out as far as if I were to get closer, which in reality is more or less the same as the top button on top. It's just in reverse.
And to clarify real quick, the paper at the bottom that you see there, that plane, that represents the paper that perhaps you would have printed out in real life, which we'll show later. And then the movement is you're moving either the phone around it or you're moving the actual paper, and how your experience is going to react to that, right?
Correct. So right now we're using a printed paper with the image on it. There are other examples where it would be like, say, a wine bottle or a movie poster or, some type of multimedia that you want to jump off of. Now I'm using a full-blown image with the tracking information, zap code on the bottom here, but you can as well just use a zap code. The bigger you have, the more tracking stability you can get.
Right, exactly. And then just for those that don't know, to run the actual AR app, you use Zapper's AR app that you download in iOS or Android, and then you scan that code, and then that initiates the actual app.
Correct.
Yep, cool. So, all right, I think we have a good baseline here. We can move on to the actual explanation of how you created this.
Well, just for creating, basically start off with a tracking image. In this case, the image was the bottom paper. I created the image using models that I've already had. I've just turned them into a flat image. From there, you attach your Zapper code, which is something you can receive from the Zapper website. Once you log in, you get codes are generated, and you just use those codes. They're very nice. They provide you a code with Get Zapper code and the little logos. They have multiple versions of that you can choose from. I chose this one basically because it tells you that there's an app available for it. Not everybody realizes you need the actual app. From that point, as we build up in the hierarchy here on the left, I create a group called World, and then from there I broke it down to each individual thing that I was going to be. Sun, moon, stars, the mill, which is the actual main building here, clouds that will show up as the weather changes. I've created my own billboard here, which will display the weather, date, and temperature. Lightning, which is actually going to be part of the thunderstorm. The next group I have listed, created, is lighting, which is the main dramatic lighting, which changes based on the orientation of the sun. Then we're going to jump down here. I have weather modes, which will go into a little bit more. Settings is actually what I probably should show you here. I have a settings page. There's a little gear in the bottom corner. And once you click on that, it will pop up a settings button, which will allow us to do dynamically changing from Sydney, London, and Los Angeles. Let's see, it'll make that a little easier to see here. I have the weather between Fahrenheit and Celsius, and on the bottom here, I have a weather mods button on or off. This will allow us to scroll through each one of the weather modes, so that way you can just see what they all are in the actual app. You take a look on the bottom of the app there. There's a time button. This time button plays time forward. The weather information that we are pulling is a 5-day, every 3-hour weather report. So as we hold that button down, time will circulate forward in time. The sun, star, moves will rotate, and weather will change based on whatever new data that's downloaded. We will show you some of the coding here. Up in the script here, I am using the a JSON command here from openweathermap.org. I pulled down a weather location, and as you can see here, I changed between the switching. Here's my switch for locations. Then I have the unit switch, which is between metric and English, and then obviously they require an API key.
So you're pulling the weather location. It's an array, obviously, right? And
correct.
Where do you store that information?
I have an array up on top here. Because the array starts with 0, I've just make the first one on a blank. So I've done imperial units, the metric, London, Los Angeles, and Sydney are the locations. And then from there, like I said, my API key. Those information, as you use the settings button, will tell it which one of the array to use.
And where is it reading that information that you selected, right? Because you go into settings and you select London or LA. So where is the script that says, okay, when you click on this, set a variable?
All right, we will go to that. Settings. All right, so let's make this visible. All right, so this is our settings page.
Right.
This is, as you see here, I've got location off is for Sydney. When you tap the Sydney button, part of Zapper's features that they created recently is I can activate timeline states. So in this case, set time location for the default. So it plays this symbol, which changes the buttons for me. So it turns one button on, turn another button off for that. Now that's just to make the physical appearance of buttons turning on and off. The actual code is here, where I basically tell it I have a exported variable because it's a TypeScript. So these are my exported variables here. Back when we hit this button, it tells it that, okay, the weather location is set to 1, which is Sydney, and then weather array. So it tells me 0 basically because the weather information that we get from the download has the 40 different weather patterns for the 5-day period. So we're in weather array 0 position. So it resets it so that way, say you're looking at Sydney and you're going forward in time. As you go forward in time, you go down through that array of weather patterns. Now, as things that we change location, we reset the array back to 0 so that way you can start from the beginning and go through it again for the weather data that we retrieve from the JSON. And then this here, where it says symbol node script, this actually calls the JSON command again. to refetch this. So it's basically calling this export command here, grabs the information. As it goes through here, it separates the time and date information from the variable, and then from there it will move the sun to match the current orientation of the first value. So say if you're in Los Angeles and you check it, it's not the same time as Los Angeles as it is in UK for London. So it will adjust the sun to match the current first weather pattern that comes from the JSON file.
I see. And that display weather data is the actual initiates the actual animation, or is it the set timeline that does that?
It will actually, what this will do is that going through the information, I separate the time, so that way I just have the hour format, because the information that's received is a full date and military time format, 24-hour minutes, seconds. So in my information here, I separate the time apart. Then I am actually calling a command here where it says set timeline, which is actually further down my list here. So this is a case statement matching to a timeline here. So as you see on my timeline here, you see the labels on top where I've got 00, 03, 06, 09. These will actually coincide with those timeline positions. So,
and you're activating, depending on which one it is, you activate that position in the timeline. Yeah, that makes sense.
And then that way it matches, and then from there you go forward in time as you hold the time button.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Thank you for clarifying that.
Not a problem. I'll go back up to the top here. Setting the timeline, or grabbing the information, setting the timeline is what I do first. After that, I actually go through and do the weather information. So I kind of go through the data a second time, or we separate out as far as the temperature, weather icons, wind speed information. From that, depending upon what it is, will depend on stuff. Like in this case here, my wind speed, I have it switching between a metric and English, so that way it will adjust the fan speed. I have 3 different speeds of the windmill fan rotating based off of this information. And then, of course, those speeds will vary depending upon if it's English or metric. As we go down here, I get weather icons. The information you get a lot of information back. So I went through and looked the best way of separating that information to make it useful to me. One of the features they do is they offer a weather icon. In this case here, it's based between 01D and 01N, which is day and night. So you've got all clear weather, and going down depending upon if it's light rain or scattered showers, things like that. So I'm just using basic if statements here that says, okay, if this value equals that, then we're going to stop any weather that may be running, or timeline that may be of weather previously, and then we'll set it to whatever the suggested is, like in this case, clear sky or few clouds and things like that. So this here is what changes each individual pattern based off of what it comes up as. I like to do a lot of debugging, so I have a console logs sending me that information so I can see it in a debug as I go.
And where is this console?
This is actually a feature that's when you publish this, it will give you the option of pulling up a console.
In the app itself, in the Zapper app on your phone?
No, it's actually a PC app. It's basically a copy of the Zapper app, but because it's on the PC, we can open up the script editor and see
the console. Yep. Correct. That makes sense.
So that more or less is for the coding portion of it, since with Zapworks, because it's so, you can see things as you work on it. You can do a lot of the editing here unless it comes down to the actual scripting portion of it, where you need to actually see logs and stuff like that.
Makes sense. And the language, you said it was TypeScript, which is based on JavaScript.
Correct. So if you know one, you more or less know the other.
Right. Now, an interesting thing is, obviously, you've created a very sophisticated application here. You can create other types of applications really without any code, because I've done it before within this app. But here, what we're trying to show is that you can actually really take it to the next level.
Correct. Now, I'm just getting the JSON information. You can push the information as well. So I've actually seen examples where the person takes like a scoreboard and he will pull the last three top scores. And then when your score is done, it gets pushed to and added to the cycle so that the next time it runs, it will pull it back down. So if you have, if you have that system where you can send it to, so you can use it pretty much for anything data back and forth that you would like to do. So if you want to collect data from people as they're using your apps and stuff, you can grab it and push it and go back and forth.
Yep, definitely. Now, can you explain just a little bit more about controllers?
Yes, controllers is actually one of the really big features that Zapworks really utilizes. The controllers, you have two basic types that you can use. You can do states, which basically are quick toggles as far as things. Like right now, I'm using the states for the weather. So right now, I have the state few clouds. And basically what it would do is my first cloud, you can see I have visible. I turned it on and I have the color set to standard. As you go down, I have multiple clouds here and you can see each one of them changes. Now, if it's a true or false, it's basically an instant option. So it happens right away at the beginning of the activity or at the end of the activity. So say I call the few clouds, it will either be visible right immediately or it will play through this and then become visible at the end. That statement saying that is because we have speeds, which fast, I believe, is like 3 seconds. Normal, I think, is like 5 to 7. And slow, I think, is like 10 seconds. I'm not quite sure.
And we're not going to hold you to it. I mean, plus or minus, but the point is that you have fast, normal, and slow. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Now, these are the states which come in handy for turning things on and off and, moving that way. Now, you can...
And just to clarify, those states you've created, obviously.
Correct. Exactly. So I've created the group states for that. Now, as far as comparing it to the timeline, like with the sun and moon, timeline, it plays through that cycle. So a state would more or less be the difference between the beginning and the end of a timeline, where the timeline is actually, you can specify how long it is, you can specify how far between each things happen as far as that goes. So you can kind of do some of the stuff with states, but timeline gives you so much more control over how it all works.
Right, because there is no fast, slow, or medium, and you control that.
Correct. And where, as you look on here, you can see there's a timeline, the numbers in milliseconds.
Right.
And from there, you can adjust.
Yeah, that makes sense. So controllers have two types. They have timelines and just states.
Correct.
Got it. Okay, cool.
And like I said, you can create an entire experience just using these items here and without doing coding. As we switch back up here, like what I was showing you earlier, as you see when I have, like in this case, the cancel button from our settings, you see it's got this little yellow icon at the side.
Right.
It is running a state where it's telling the setting state to the hide mode. And that is actually triggering this icon right here. So when you click on that, that's just telling the code to run. Now, I can manually code that information and add it and tell it to fire that sequence, but this is a quicker way of doing it. Like I said, it comes in handy for anybody who doesn't want to do coding, or in my case where I'm doing a lot of stuff, I can just tell it to do this instead of doing the code.
So obviously the state that you have there is on tap, which is when people click on the screen, but do you have other kinds of states that you can put in there?
Yep. So we have the on tap, which allows you to activate other things. Trigger. Basically, we have like a feature that's called a rail coaster, where if it enters the trigger region or if it leaves the trigger region. So if I were to say attach it to the camera and I'm in a 3D environment, if I look around and I were to point at an item, I can have it happen and do something. So if you're in a 360 environment, say you have a door, and as I look around, I look at the door I can tell it to animate opening that door at that time.
Right. So as you can tell here, for these kinds of actions, you're pretty limited, and that's why you might want to jump into the scripting portion. That's where you can do all sorts of actions.
Correct. Yes, this is quick firing for the controllers and stuff.
The most popular kind of interactions.
Exactly.
Right. That makes sense.
Now, as far as say the button itself, if I wanted to create my own scripting from there, I can do obviously a pointer down, pointer up, pointer enter, pointer leave.
Right. You have more customization, but you have to code it. Yeah.
Correct.
Right. No, that makes sense. Yeah. One is for more rapid development, but you've got to deal with the fact that it may be more limited.
Correct.
Yep, makes total sense. Cool. So what's next you're going to show us?
On top here, we have a publish option. We also have a preview option, which will allow you to preview your item for, I believe it's about 15 minutes, where you don't require to have your own Zap code. In my case here, I do. So you select which one. You can see I have a few other things I've been working on.
And how do you preview? Can you show us the preview first before we publish it?
Previews and publish are exactly the same.
Ah, got it. Okay.
The only difference is that instead of selecting a code that I own, this is my Zap code. Preview just generates a random code that Zapbox lets you use for a while.
Got it. And the key here is that you need to create a Zap code, which we're not going to cover how to do that. You can go to Zapper and they have plenty of tutorials there to show you. But you create a Zap code on the website and then you attach it to this experience. And the Zap code is really basically a pointer to this app. So that way the Zapper app knows when you scan it, which app to get.
Correct.
Okay, cool.
And from there, like I said, we hit the publish button and we'll upload what we have right now to the app. So at this point, if I've made any changes, they would affect once you scan the app with the page.
And this is uploading it to their servers.
Correct. Zapworks has their own servers that once you scan this code, it will pull down from their websites.
I see.
Now, as you see here, it's successfully uploaded. They like to keep your size around less than 5 megs. Now, I've had some very large ones. The downside is the larger they are, the longer it takes for it to download for their customer. Obviously, the person doesn't want to be standing there waiting for something to download for 5 minutes. So you want to keep it small. You also see there's a Launch Zapper for Windows button here. This button will actually launch the version of the PCs for where you, like I said, you get to debugging and things like that. You do need to have a web camera in order to actually interact with it as far as, it physically looks at your scan item that you're using. So if I were to turn this on, I'd have to hold up the paper in front of my camera and things like that, but comes in handy for debugging still. Since we've published it here, now we go to your phone and we'll scan the pre-printed out tracking image and we'll see what it looks like.
So I'm going to go ahead and run my Zapper app. And it's going to start and it'll see that sheet that you just gave us. So it's scanning it. And we'll wait a little bit. There it goes. And there's the experience. You can see the clouds, which is really cool. We can click on the settings right there. And you see Sydney, London. Let's go to LA. We'll click on LA. You can see it slowed down the mill. We'll leave it in Fahrenheit and we'll check the weather modes as on. And you see that there is a modes button that just came up. So I'm going to click on modes and you can see that it's a clear day. So the clouds are gone and they're back here. Multiple clouds, single cloud, a lot of clouds. We'll go back to the settings. We'll turn off weather modes. We'll click it there, and you see that there's a time button. If I click on the time button and hold it, you can see that animation that Steve coded that's going around. Now, of course, I can move in and check out the experience as you would any other experience. You can pick up the paper, and then it tracks with it, right? So you can see it, and then we can move. We'll put it down again. So this is a very cool app, Steve. I like it in showing the actual weather as well. So if we change back to, let's say, Sydney, and then it's showing me the time in Sydney there. So you can see it's kind of cloudy. Very cool stuff. All right, Steve. So that was a pretty cool app. So here we are back in the studio. So anything else we should cover before we end this pretty awesome tutorial?
Not really. This is your basic overview of, doing things on here. You can definitely obviously do much more with this. This is just one idea. I've seen many other great ideas out there. Zapper has done quite a few competitions as well as showing their own things that have been created and stuff. So, take a look at them all and see, get ideas and be creative.
Very cool. And I'll be publishing the show notes. We'll put a link to the actual Zap code so people can actually try it when they download the Zapper app. I will also put a link on how to register for the free version and all that kind of stuff, so you guys will be able to check it out. But Steve, I really want to thank you for sharing your knowledge. I mean, obviously this isn't a step 1, step 2 kind of tutorial. It's really just to give an overview of Zapworks Studio, and also that you can go beyond the basics, right? That you can go into more coding and you can basically go as crazy as you want.
Correct. I mean, this is just the beginning of what you can do so much more with this.
Right. Yeah, my mind is like going a million miles per hour now, thinking of a billion ideas. So thank you for doing that to me.
No problem. I do that daily.
That's excellent. Now, if people want to get a hold of you, do you want to give an email, a URL to your website?
They can go ahead and email me. My email is stevesanerd@gmail. So it's stevesanerd@gmail.com.
Excellent. We'll put it in the show notes as well. Well, Steve, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And to the rest of you, I'm glad you were here with us. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and remember to subscribe to my channel. It will only take you a second, but it will really help me tremendously so that I can continue providing you these kinds of tutorials on a weekly basis. If you are ever in the Southern California area, we have a monthly meetup with lots of great VR and AR presentations. You can join or RSVP for our next meetup at howtocreatevr.com/meetup. Finally, if you are interested in learning more about how to create VR, AR, and MR experiences, please visit howtocreatevr.com. So until the next episode, I'm Marcelo Lewin. Cheers, everyone.